Oregon's Right to Life political action group says that candidates on the left are pushing a narrative that more conservative candidates have extreme views when it comes to abortion, but the group says it's Oregon's laws that are extreme. With most ballots in the hands of Oregon voters, Oregon's Democratic candidate for governor, Tina Kotek, is bringing up the topic of abortion rights in a final plea to Oregon's voters. Citing unaffiliated candidate Betsy Johnson's lower poll ratings, she claims any vote for Johnson would bring her Republican opponent closer to victory.
Christine Drazen, who's the Republican candidate, wants to ban abortion.
Drazen says she stands by the current Oregon laws.
I'm a pro-life woman. I've never shied away from my pro-life values. And also, I respect the law. And right now, Oregon law gives access to abortion.
Citing previous legislation that Drazen supported as a lawmaker, Kotek claims she'd use her executive office to stop abortion rights laws she doesn't agree with.
As governor, would have a lot of ability to impede the work that we have done here in Oregon to provide access to reproductive care.
On the same day Kotek spoke on this issue, Oregon's Right to Life political action group spoke out against abortion rights. The PAC's executive director, Lois Anderson.
Across the state, millions are being spent calling pro-life candidates extreme.
She says she believes it's Oregon's abortion right laws that are extreme.
Later abortions are currently legal in Oregon. There are no restrictions, no protections for unborn babies up until birth.
Their press conference featured speakers like Amy Miles, who says she survived an attempted abortion.
The reality is that if I've been born today in this state, children like I was are not protected and guaranteed a chance to live.
The group believes that Oregon should pass laws to require medical care for infants that survived abortions.
I will fight every day to make sure that we never allow those people who continue the big lie, including my opponent on her website before she changed it in July, to question that election.
Do you believe that me and my family are a threat to democracy, Senator Murray? Because tell everyone here today, either that or disavow your campaign's dangerous rhetoric that has spent millions of dollars to attack and paint me as someone I am not.
You believe that the 2020...
Murray also spent most of the hour-long debate on the Gonzaga campus in Spokane defending her 30-year record in Washington. Smiley attempting to sway voters in the crowd and across the state. It's time for a change.
I am here to unify, to bring us together, to serve this country. This is not about politics. This is about the United States of America.
That's what I'm working on for all of you, because I've come home and heard from you that these are programs that have really meaningful impact on families, and I am there to protect you.
Smiley is a newcomer running for her first public office. Murray is seeking her 6th term representing Washington in the Senate.
I'm Laurel Demkovich, and I am pleased to be here today to moderate this debate between Senator Patty Murray and candidate Tiffany Smiley. Today's debate is a Q&A format. I will pose a question, and each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer. Each candidate has the opportunity for 2 rebuttals throughout the debate. If you choose to use one, feel free to hold up one of the cards that you have, and I will give you 30 seconds to do that. There will be no counter rebuttals. I also reserve the right to ask follow-up questions when needed. Ms. Murray won the coin toss to determine the order, and she chose to open. I also want to mention to both of the candidates that the monitor that has the time has been going in and out, but the time is correct, and it will come back. So just keep that in mind. So let's get started. There is no formal opening statement, but I do want to start by asking a broad question to focus on your experiences. Ms. Murray, you have been Washington Senator for almost 30 years now. Ms. Smiley, you have said that you want to be a fresh face for Washington in the U.S. Senate. Why do each of you think you are the best candidate for this position? Ms. Murray, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you to the League of Women Voters and the Spokesman Review for hosting this debate tonight. These have been really challenging times. I understand that. I grew up in a family with 7 kids. My dad was a World War II veteran, and he ran a small store on the main street of Bothell. We had tight budgets. I understand that. So I always fight to make sure we have an economy that works for working families. In the past year and a half, I have passed legislation to lower prescription drugs costs. I've worked to deliver the largest middle-class tax cut in generations, to lower energy costs, fight climate change, and bring manufacturing back here to Washington State. You know, whether it's getting a VA clinic in the Tri-Cities or making sure Spokane has the resources for police and firefighters, I always listen to communities here and fight for our families in Washington, D.C. This is one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime. Women's rights are on the ballot. If you send me back a pro-choice Senate, I will work to pass my legislation to codify Roe into law. Our democracy is on the ballot. I will fight to protect every American's right to vote. And our economy is on the ballot. I will keep fighting to lower costs and make sure your family has a fair shake. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Smiley, you have 90 seconds.
Yes, at 23 years old, I walked into my husband's trauma care unit at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. I had student loan debt, I had a car payment, and he had tubes coming out of every orifice of his body. He was in a coma. And that was my first experience with the bureaucratic government system. My amazing husband is in the audience with us today. And thank God I was a nurse, because I wasn't afraid to take on the government and fight for him. I didn't know if I was going to meet him dead or alive, but I was going to be there. And unfortunately, the suicide car bomber that he was negotiating with in service to our country in Mosul, Iraq, had detonated his car and sent shrapnel through both of his eyes, so he would be forever blind. But I knew he still had purpose, and I fought for his life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I took on big government, and I won. He went on and became the first blind active duty officer to ever serve our country. We served for over a decade with him completely blind. And then I knew I had to go back and make it right for everyone else. So I took on the VA. I took another flight out to Walter Reed Army out to Washington, D.C. And I took on the VA, and we passed meaningful reform for veterans that was so needed. So for me, it was truly in that fight that I knew we have so much more to fight for. I have a record of taking on big government and winning. My opponent doesn't. She works for Washington, D.C. She is the image of big government. Washington State deserves better.
Thank you. Ms. Smiley, we'll start with you for this one. Congress has tried and failed to pass comprehensive immigration reform for decades. Would you support a bill that increases border security as well as provides a legal pathway to citizenship for unauthorized immigrants? Why or why not?
Absolutely. You know, this is such an important issue for Washington State because we know that China is pumping the components of fentanyl across our southern border. It's in Washington State. It's not just in our homeless encampments that I have visited and spent time in, but it's also in our schools. And it's killing our kids. One pill will kill our kids here in Washington State. It's happening all over Washington State. So I went to the southern border to see it for myself. And I talked to law enforcement officers down there, and you know what they said? Our number one roadblock to solving this problem is Washington, D.C. I don't know if my opponent, Senator Murray, has ever been down to the southern border, but I went down there because I know how important it is to Washington State. We have got to secure our border. We've got to stop the flow of fentanyl that is coming across and killing our kids. Every state is a border state. What my agenda for recovery and reform calls for, to turn crisis into hope for all of Washington. We can make sure that Title 42 remains in place, ensure that our Border Patrol agents have every resource that they need to secure our border with technology and resources. And you know, career politicians, they like to use immigration as a political wedge when it comes to election time. I actually will go secure our border and ensure that there is a pathway to legal citizenship in our country.
Thank you. Ms. Murray, you have 90 seconds.
Well, this is an important question, but first let me say I have been to the border. I went to the border when the Trump administration, who my opponent has said she would like his endorsement, I went then because the Trump presidency was separating our children from their mothers at the border, at the southern border. And I went not with a photographer, I went with a pediatrician to go make sure that the kids who are separated from their parents had the care they need. Our immigration system today, which is what you asked about, is not working for anyone. It is not working for our growers or our service industry. It's not working for our high-tech companies who are trying to attract new people here to develop jobs here in the United States. We have to fix our immigration system. I have voted for and worked for changing our immigration system to make sure that we allow a path to citizenship, that we fund our Border Patrol and Customs agent in a good way, and to make sure that we have a system that works for those who are seeking asylum. Why don't we have that? Because the Republicans stopped it from happening. They now use immigration during every election to score political points and have refused to come back to the table. We can't let this be a political fight anymore. We need to work to find solutions. It's important for our economy, it's important for humanitarian reasons, and it's important because we are a country of immigrants and we can do better than this.
Thank you. We will start with you for the next question. Nations around the world are experiencing high inflation in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as rising gas prices worsened by the war in Ukraine. That's no different than what's happening in the United States right now. Ms. Murray, what should Congress do to address rising costs? You have 90 seconds.
Such an important question. In every community, I know families are struggling, and like I told you in the beginning, I know what that feels like. So I have been very focused on lowering costs for families as we get through this global challenge that we are facing. I have worked to lower prescription drug costs. In the Inflation Reduction Act, the biggest reduction in prescription drugs we have ever seen, allowing Medicare to negotiate for lower prices, capping $35 insulin at $35, making sure that families have extension of the ACA so they can get lower costs for insurance. We passed a bill to make sure that we're lowering energy costs. If we move to a clean new energy program and we lower our costs, that will help every family's pocketbook. I am looking at every step we can take to lower costs, including my plan to pass childcare. And you elect me, and we will get that done so families can lower the cost of their childcare, get back to work, and help our economy be productive again.
Thank you. Ms. Smiley.
Well, that sounds like a Washington, D.C. answer to me. I took on Washington, D.C., Patty, and I won. You've never taken on Washington, D.C. You are Washington, D.C. Senator Murray stood with Joe Biden with the Inflation Reduction Act and said, this is going to help us. Don't be deceived by the name, because this isn't coming from me. This is coming from the CBO. It does nothing to combat inflation. In fact, it raises taxes on all of us. 87,000 IRS agents coming after our small business owners and hardworking Washington families. Do you know those making $25,000 or less are 5 times more likely to be audited by the IRS? That's who I'm standing up and fighting for. Also in that, I think it's important that Washington families know Senator Murray was the deciding vote on the excise tax on natural gas. So there has to be a way to pay for all of this. So you will see your energy costs go up. She stood by Joe Biden with the American Rescue Plan and said, we are in a better place now. In every room I've been into in Washington State, I've been in all 39 counties. I've listened to thousands of voters across Washington State. I ask, are you in a better place? They say, no, we are worse. Senator Murray allowed $1 billion to go to criminals like Larry Nassar and the Boston bomber. That's not good use of taxpayers' money. I will be a steward of that. I will ensure that we reduce the spending. We rein in the out-of-control spending. I certainly will make sure that 87,000 IRS agents do not come after you. And I will permanently extend the 2017 tax cuts for the middle class and get our economy on the right track.
Time is up. We will start with you for the next question, Ms. Smiley. After the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade earlier this year, both parties have talked about crafting a nationwide abortion law, whether that be to restrict access or expand access to abortion. What would you want or not want to see in federal abortion legislation?
Yes, I've been clear. I am personally pro-life. I think there's good people on both sides of this issue, and we need to be able to come into the center of this and acknowledge it. I've been clear from the very beginning. I oppose a federal abortion ban. That's long before the unprecedented leak from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's decision gave the power to the people.
And that's where I believe it belongs. I respect the will of the voters here in Washington state. So what I will do is ensure that women have access to health care, that they have access and affordable access to contraception and childcare. Unlike Senator Murray, who's been there for the last 30 years, I'll go get that done for women. And when women are in a time of crisis, I want to ensure that they have every resource that they need should they choose to keep their child, that they have every resource, that it's not a ticket to poverty or a lack of education. You know, there's one extreme on this issue, and it's Senator Murray, because if she had it her way, she would change the will of the voters of Washington state. Her record represents it. It would be taxpayer-funded, abortion on demand, all the way up to the point of birth. And the question we should all ask Senator Murray is, do you believe in any legal limitations to abortion? And again, don't take it from me that the most recent Newsweek article that was out yesterday, Senator Murray has no right to lecture me or any women in this room or in this state or country for that matter on how we should be treated, or any of us. Patty told her national security advisor that her luck had run out for having 2 children within 2 years, and she fired her. Senator Murray?
Thank you, Ms. Smiley. Your time is up. Thank you. Ms. Murray?
There is a huge difference between me and my opponent on this issue. I believe that every woman should be able to make her own health care choices about her own family, working with her doctor, her faith, and her own needs. This should not be decided by politicians. You just heard my opponent say politicians should decide. I do not agree with that at all. We should not be in a room with people when they are making medical decisions. Now, I hear my opponent over there saying, I'm 100% pro-life, don't worry. I gotta tell you, I was in the Senate. I saw Supreme Court nominees come in front of us and say to us, I'm pro-life, don't worry, and look what happened. They overturned 50 years of precedent and put this country and women's lives in chaos. We have women coming here to Washington state because they can't get reproductive care where they live. We have providers right here in Spokane who live in Idaho and are worried about the work that they do every day to save lives and help women. They will be arrested when they go home. We have trackers who are following women in this country using their phone apps to make sure that they know where they went, and when they come home, threaten them with arrest. This cannot be. If you elect me, I will pass my legislation to codify Roe into law and put precedent back in place in this country and protect women's right to choose.
You want to use one of your rebuttals?
Sorry, yes, to clarify, you agree politicians should decide this. I said I believe that the people should, and I respect the will of the voters here in Washington state.
You can use one.
Let me make it very clear. What she just said is out of the Supreme Court's hand. That was a constitutional right that we had under 50 years of precedent. What she said is politicians in state legislatures could now decide. Politicians in a room with a woman and her family and her faith and her doctor making that decision.